And now that we're up and running, let's keep that momentum going with our next speaker and a true ProductCon favorite, Penny Cito, head of product at Amazon. Penny is a seasoned leader with a passion for using data to tackle complex user problems. She currently leads product development for Prime Gaming, one of Amazon's most innovative digital experiences. Before Amazon, Penny spent 6 years at American Express as Vice President of Product Development. She drove large-scale transformation across their entire product ecosystem. Today, she's going to be diving into a topic that is front and center for many of us, from hype to moat, building a defensible AI strategy. It is a timely and critical conversation, and there is no one better to lead it. Please join me in welcoming Penny Cito to the stage.
Hi, everyone. You guys, come on in. I'm excited. I think this is my 4th or 5th ProductCon now, which basically means that I've either leveled up or I've just refused to leave. I'll be honest, when I was thinking about what topic to speak on today, I didn't want to do another talk about what's new in AI, because most of what I cover would probably be obsolete in a few months with the pace that things are going. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit more evergreen. And this talk is really about applying product thinking at the next level. So it helps us cut through the hype of AI and focus on lasting value. I think it actually complements Dave's talk, which I loved, because his talk was about going from PM to GM, and this is about going from feature roadmaps to business flywheels. But before we dive in, I have to do the standard disclaimer. Anything that I say today, if you think it's bold or brilliant or baloney, these views are mine, and they're not those of my current or former employers. All right, so let's start with a little bit about me. I actually went the inverse route, where I spent more time in understanding business leadership and actually developing more GM-level skills before becoming a builder. I started my career in management consulting. So I worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. I was doing things like working in P&L, business strategy, growth strategy, a lot with C-suite executives. Then I moved and worked with a lot of early stage, growth stage companies, and that's where I learned how to do things like develop vision, how to pitch to VCs, and how to talk to a board. Basically, the last probably decade, I've been working in product development across American Express. Who's Amex in this crowd? I feel like there's usually a good Amex show. Hey, Amex, awesome. So across Amex and Amazon now, lots of different products, worked in MarTech, personalization, enterprise digital platforms. Now I work in games. As mentioned, I am in Prime Gaming, and currently I took on scope leading our Gen AI initiatives in games. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about what is going on with the AI hype. We're going to try to unpack it and really get a reality dose in terms of what value we're actually seeing. Then we're going to go and walk through the phases of AI adoption. And lastly, we're going to talk about how do we apply this when it comes to building an AI moat, and making sure that we're doing things that are defensible. And as I go through this, I usually like to talk through other use cases and examples to really bring things to life. So first, let's talk about the AI hype. And I think we see this a lot in our everyday lives. Basically, when it comes to work, we're using AI to do stuff like generate emails, automate Jira tickets, and things like that. When it comes to our personal lives, we're using it for things like legal advice, diagnosing medical problems, and yes, we're even dating it. There are AI boyfriends that are out there. And when we talk about culturally, we've actually hit full zeitgeist. in terms of what folks are asking ChatGPT, there's this new viral trend all the time. For a while it was roast me like Gordon Ramsay, and recently I've seen things like this, where it's basically turned my pet into a human. And it's gotten, I would say, like increasingly disturbing in terms of what we've seen. Now, when it comes to the pace of innovation, it's also really, really fast. Just this year, we've seen models drop like GPT 4.1, Claude 3.7, DeepSeek R1. Oop. Yep. And every release promises faster reasoning, longer context, and better fine-tuning. We're also constantly hearing new jargon like RAG 2.0, SLMs, and MCPs. AI is a field that literally lives for its own alphabet soup, and it's really hard to keep up. When it comes to investment, we have not seen so much optimism to date. Last year, startups raised about $100 billion in investments in AI, and enterprises spent almost 3 times that. We also saw a 70% increase in the AI job market in terms of job postings. So we're really seeing that across industries, across functions, across org charts. There is clear bets in AI that are getting bigger, faster. But let's talk about the reality of this a little, because with all of this AI hype, we are also seeing some challenges. There's a lot of organizational strategic misalignment. There's turf wars. There's things like really a ton of AI slop out there and increasing lawsuits. And as companies make this wholesale shift towards AI, the results have been uneven. We're seeing things like high failure rates. It's really hard to go from demo to production. Also, ROI results have been pretty lackluster. And we're seeing a lack of differentiation. A lot of customers have said that they struggle to differentiate between competing AI products, and that's really because most of the AI products are using the same 3 or 4 general models. And lastly, we're seeing a lot of AI fatigue and backlash. Some reports have said that 41% of Gen Z employees are actually purposely sabotaging their company's AI efforts because either they don't trust the results or they're worried it's going to take over their jobs. And it's not that the AI hype is not deserved or that technology isn't amazing. It's that we have to really figure out what's real here and how do we find value and value that's sustainable. And that's really a strategy problem at the end of the day. And it's where I think product leaders like all of you in this room can help. We are the ones that are closest when it comes to the technology, business, and customer problems. And we're the ones that can help steer the organization towards things that are durable, differentiated, and defensible. So I think it's helpful to talk about the AI adoption phases. There's a lot of different models for this. I kind of like this view because I think it's simple. And one of the caveats I will say is that even within a company, there's going to be different businesses and use cases that exist in different stages. And in addition to that, sometimes you might overlap in stages. So phase 1 is kind of your experimentation or your toy phase. This is where everyone's hyped up and saying, we have to do something with AI. We're grabbing off-the-shelf models. We're looking at the lowest hanging fruit. And this is where we saw a lot of the early chatbots. And I'm going to talk through a few Amazon use cases here. But an example of this is something Amazon launched last year. Our music team launched Maestro. And basically, it was this Gen AI playlist. You could use prompts like emojis or like, I want to recycle my boyfriend, and it would generate a playlist for you. So this was fun. It wasn't super integrated, but it was a great way to launch in beta and just start learning about things. The second phase, and I suspect a lot of folks out there in this phase, is the efficiency phase. This is where companies are like, we're committed to AI, but we want ROI with it. We want to focus on real value that's durable and tangible. And usually that means things like cost savings and productivity. And I'm seeing a lot of head nods. And it usually means let's start internally and dog food some of this stuff. So at Amazon, we had this too. They launched a tool called Cedric to help us write those really long Amazon documents that we always have to write, and something called Amazon Q, which really helped with business and coding context. And again, people really usually like this phase, and in fact, a lot of folks usually stay in this phase because it's the most obvious, the most useful, and they feel like it's the most scalable. Next, phase 3 is about differentiation. And I think this is where the AI gets a lot more interesting, and you're focused on true customer-facing value and solving real problems. Here, you're often using things that are fine-tuned and custom models. An example here is Alexa Plus. So this is a new Alexa software that came out in early access this year. And basically, it's Alexa Gen AI powered. So it's more conversational, it's more contextual, and it's more personalized. This last phase is the hardest one to achieve, and it's the one why we're all here today. It's the moat phase. This one means that AI is deeply embedded. We're moving away from buying and borrowing models to really building systems. And I think AWS Bedrock is a great example of this. Bedrock is an enterprise-grade platform, basically where companies can come, they can get access to the latest models and Amazon native tools to do things like hosting, fine-tuning, and scaling. And this was an infrastructure level bet that Amazon made. It's basically made so that it can compound over time, and it's incredibly difficult to copy. So when we think about it, we really want to think about how do we move from this experimental demo phase to competitive moat. Do you guys like that? I decided to step up my animation game this year. And when we think about that, I kind of want to ask you all, when it comes to moats in medieval times, basically they were these things that were built around castles so that it would keep enemies away. And I'm curious, what do you think when people were building a physical moat, what was the most important things that they had to do? Just shout it out. Alligators? Okay, anything else? Like, what is the most important considerations? Death? Security? Yes. Okay, so the answer was death. Basically, the most important thing when it comes to building a moat is how deep it is, because that's the most complex. And when we think about going from left to right, it's about going deeper into things. So depth of integration, going deeper in terms of data, going deeper in terms of how you think about your org and value creation. And that's what we're going to zero in on today. We're going to focus on the moat pillar. We're going to talk about basically the different aspects of it that we want to see more depth in. So this is things like making sure we have a great organizational model, making sure we have deep, differentiated, proprietary data, making sure that we have learning flywheels where we're constantly improving, and architecture that allows us to scale, and governance that allows us to do it safely. These pillars basically show up across all 4 phases of AI maturity, but when it comes to the moat phase, they're not surface level. They're deeply embedded, mature, and interconnected. All right, I'm going to start with organizational model first because I feel like it usually comes last. It's like, do all these things, but also make sure you have the right talent and the right culture. But I actually think if you don't have these things first, you're not going to get moat-level results. And I like to use the example of Microsoft because I think they did a good job at this across the board. So, best practices. The first thing is top-down leadership. And I think Satya did an amazing job of this. He basically said that we need to treat AI like a core business capability, not just another tech initiative on the roadmap. he also didn't just greenlight AI projects. He said that AI is the defining technology of our time, and Microsoft was going to be AI first. He actually even tied executive compensation to AI adoption. Next is making sure that it's impact-driven. And basically, Microsoft has done things like create digital AI value frameworks, where they're making sure that they're not just a solution looking for a problem. They're identifying clear use cases, they're prioritizing them, they're seeing how they map to their enterprise strategy, and they're making sure they're measurable and have clear ROI. And they're doing this early on, not after the fact. Third, it's really important to have a culture of experimentation. And they have this embedded within their culture. They have a garage program where you're allowed to incubate new ideas. A lot of their AI initiatives come out of this. And a lot of what they want to do is to go from this know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. Fourth is expertise and access. I think it's really important to have people who understand the problem space, so domain experts, as well as people who understand the solution space, AI experts working together. You can't just overly invest in one or the other. And it's also really important to invest in elevating your entire company's AI aptitude. And Microsoft did this with 365 Copilot. They had these LLM experts working with productivity product people working together to solve real problems. And they also did an insane investment in Microsoft Learn so that the entire company had access to AI training. And last, scaled innovation. Microsoft looked beyond, business units. They broke the barriers down there. They looked beyond their own company, and they really saw AI as a shared capability. They said, let's partner across each other to find these synergies. And they've done that with stuff like, their early partnership with OpenAI. But they've also gone across industries and worked with Bayer in agriculture, financial services, and healthcare to co-own and innovate on some of these AI capabilities. So let's talk about data. And data is really our fuel. It's like kind of the obvious one when we think about moats. And something to consider is that as foundational models become more commoditized, your data can really transform something that's general purpose into a domain expert. And I'm going to use Flatiron Health here to talk through this example. Flatiron Health is a healthcare tech company that's focused on cancer research and cancer care. And I think that they've built one of the most defensible data moats in their industry. Now, I know this checklist looks long. I'm not going to go through every single thing when you think about how you audit your data, but I do think that we should touch on a few things. One of the first things that I think is probably the most important is making sure you have high-quality data. I stole this meme from, I think, a data scientist on LinkedIn, but I find it to be so true. It's garbage in, garbage out. Basically, over 70% of companies have said that their AI efforts have stalled because they did not have clean, usable, accessible data. And I do think that one of the things that Flatiron Health did a really good job at across these things is making sure that they invested in that. They have a lot of unstructured data, things like doctor's notes, pathology reports, and they use both AI and human abstraction to take all this and make it usable for their AI models. Something else that's also important is they went narrow in their domain. They didn't go overly general. They decided to not just focus on every disease. They focused on cancer. And as a result of this, they have 2,500 cancer variables that general models just wouldn't pick up. Something else to think about is how can you collect data that's unique that other people would struggle to collect? So they have custom EHR integrations and customizations. So when they're using that, only they can have access to that. Another thing to call out here is they don't just look at point-in-time data. They're looking at things that are longitudinal. So they're following customers over decades from initial diagnosis all the way through to outcome. And having this length of data is just way more valuable. And one of the last and other things I'll call out that's obvious is that they go beyond HIPAA compliance in terms of figuring out how to make sure their data is secure, private, etc. And in all honesty, a lot of these things are what makes Flatiron Health a market leader in its space. It's allowed it to do things like have higher accuracy in predicting treatment responses, and the FDA uses a lot of data in its decisions. So I wanted to say that the TLDR here is that differentiated data is a moat because it's hard for your rivals to scrape, simulate, or shortcut this. Next, we're going to talk about the learning flywheel. So you've got your differentiated data, now what? The moat comes not just from having all this data, but from using it to create a flywheel. And flywheels are basically these self-reinforcing systems where each action you take makes the next one easier, faster, or more valuable. And over time, that momentum builds. I'm going to use Waymo as an example here. Has anyone ridden a Waymo? Some folks, mostly West Coast probably. So Waymos are self-driving cars. Competitors out there are also Cruise. I, as a native New Yorker who does not know how to drive, was really excited about Waymo. I rode my first one in San Francisco last year. This is a picture of it, behind all this, looked a little bit terrified, but at the same time was super excited about it. But going back to our example, so Waymo does this fairly well. Number one, when the users interact, it collects a lot of data. Basically, every ride generates data like sensor inputs, rider feedback, and incident reports. Step two, it takes a lot of this data and it pulls it into things like perception, prediction, and planning models. And it doesn't just accumulate the data. It basically iterates on it, retrains it, and it's constantly learning how to handle new scenarios, like what happens if I hit a construction zone? Three, it takes this information and it feeds it and productionizes it so that it can do things like deliver a higher quality experience, more accuracy, and even new features. So one of the things that they were able to deliver with better models is basically autonomous freeway driving mode. And four, this leads to more users. Waymo in the last 2 years has seen an 11,000% increase in the number of monthly miles driven. And this is a signal of growth and system confidence. So you can see how this flywheel works here. As your users are interacting, you're collecting that data, you're making your model smarter. That leads to better CX and UX, and then that leads to more users and network effects, and then it keeps on going. So the big takeaway here is that a strong learning flywheel means that the more your product is used, the harder it is for competitors to catch up. Now let's talk about strategic architecture. So we've gone through a few things at this point. We've said, okay, we know that the org model is important. We know our data is important. We know that it feeds a learning flywheel. And strategic architecture, I feel like probably sounds a little bit more loaded and complex than I mean for it to be. But basically, it's how do we build our systems so that they can scale and evolve. And for this one, I'm going to use the example of Salesforce. So Salesforce and their Einstein AI, basically it powers things like forecasting, lead scoring, recommendations, all within the CRM workflows. So this builds stickiness because you are where users already are. Next, it also builds things where Agentforce and Atlas are designed as composable systems. And I think modularity is really, really important when it comes to AI, is because you want to be able to swap out new primitives or new models as it gets updated. You don't want every time you swap out a model for like the 5 or 6 products that are using it to break. Another factor here is the degree of control. A lot of folks completely rely on open source stuff or external dependencies, but it does a good job of leveraging its partner with OpenAI, but also building proprietary AI capabilities. So it doesn't have to worry about being locked in and can control things like governance and costs better. And the last point is basically allows other folks to build on their stack and platform. And I think this is really important because this builds extensibility, which leads to ecosystem effects. And ecosystem effects scale way better than pure roadmaps do. All right, this is the part where I start losing people. I hear a little buzz. I know it's probably the most boring thing, which is trust and governance. I know trust and governance, I usually get an eye roll, but I do think this is increasingly becoming one of the most important areas when it comes to AI. As companies mature, their focus shifts from scaling models to ensuring those models are safe, fair, ethical, and have human accountability. Because here's the truth. Open source does not equal to explainable. And we're not regulated does not equal to we're safe. And post-launch red teaming doesn't mean that you have a real trust architecture. So to bring this to life here, I am going to talk about Fortnite. We're going to talk about games, right? Anyone play Fortnite here? Like one hand. Do people know what Fortnite is? Hopefully, yes. OK, cool. So Fortnite's a video game. Epic Games makes them. And basically what they did last week was they launched this new feature in Fortnite Battle Royale where they had a Gen AI Darth Vader. And they used James Earl Jones' voice. And James Earl Jones has passed away, but he allowed folks to continue using his voice, even after the fact. And basically, they have him as an NPC, which is a non-playable character. But basically, folks can interact with Darth Vader and ask it things like, what's the meaning of life? Or, some funnier things like, what's your favorite McDonald's order? And this is exactly what one of the players did here. Oops. Can we get that video to play? Maybe it won't play. Let's see.
Tell me your McDonald's order.
Wookiee team leader, you presume I partake in such pedestrian establishments?
Oh.
The Empire has no need for fast food. Such nourishment is beneath me. However, if I were forced to endure such a culinary experience, I would take a chicken select meal with large fries and a Coca-Cola drink.
Get out.
So obviously, this is kind of a fun use case and example. And it's a more wholesome one. But as you can imagine, people were trying to get it to do less wholesome things. And it wasn't long before Darth Vader was cursing, saying slurs, and just being wildly inappropriate. And really, this got a lot of questions raised around things like model safeguards, AI misuse, and unfair labor complaints from SAG, actually. To Epic's credit, they did build it with permission from the folks who had the IP rights and James Earl Jones's family, and they deployed a fix within 30 minutes to get Darth Vader to stop cursing. But I think the thing to remember here is honestly, we can't throw stones. This could happen to any of us. We're building a lot of these things for the first time, and we don't always know where to look or understand how things will break. But it is important to proactively think about this, because if you are not proactively creating guardrails, you're not shipping innovation. You are shipping liability. Also, when you get trust right, it becomes a flywheel too, because the more confident your users are, the more usage you're going to see, the better data, smarter models, and again, stronger moat. So I know I'm a little over on time, but just some key takeaways. We made it to the end. So just a couple of closing dots. One, the AI hype, it's loud right now. I know every day we're hearing new things like it's going to be the end of search engines or the end of jobs, or with AGI in 2 years, it's going to be the end of us. So we really have to cut through the hype and focus on where the value is. Also, AI maturity is not linear. Organizations can live in different phases. And if you want to evolve from that demo experimentation phase to a moat phase, you have to deepen investment in the different pillars that we talked about. And it's also not enough to just deepen investment in one area, because each of these pillars, they're interconnected, they have compounding value, and any single pillar can stall, erode, or get commoditized. And as a closing dot, I really want folks to recognize that product managers and leaders who focus on first principles and strategies are going to move past the hype of chasing models to building lasting businesses. Thanks, everyone.